Have you ever felt like you're just sweeping your problems under the rug in your relationship, hoping they'll disappear? Well, guess what? It's time to stop that. Today, we're going to dive into what I believe will be helpful in with you stopping this idea of sweeping things under the rug. And with difficult conversations is not only crucial for your marriage, but also pleasing to God. And it will be the way to no longer keep sweeping things under the rug. Now, picture this. You're in your living room, or you choose any room that you want to pick in your house, and there's a huge mess on the floor. Okay. Now, instead of cleaning it up, you grab a rug and sweep it all underneath the rug. So here's what happened. It's under the rug, so it's out of sight, out of mind, right? Wrong. Just like in our marriages, when we sweep our problems under the rug, they don't magically disappear, right? They fester and grow until they eventually explode into something much bigger. Have you ever experienced that in your relationship? Have you gone into a situation where you acted as if it never happened because you want to avoid conflict? You want to do in your mind what is helpful so the relationship doesn't feel like it's been impacted, or it's going to go into a negative spiraling or a conflict. So it's avoidance that tends to be the thing that we do. So we know that God desires a thriving marriage for us. There's no question about that, because he talks about that in Ephesians chapter 5. But sometimes avoiding conflict can feel like it is the Christian thing to do, right? We're in a crossroad, because in one hand we want to be pleasing to God and do what we know that would be honoring to him. On the other hand, we find ourselves in this area where we're frustrated. We are building resentment because there are things that in our relationship, in our marriage, is not being addressed, and it's going on and on. And after a while, it becomes like, how can we keep on doing this where we know there are unfinished business, there's conversations that needed to be had, and we're not having them. So you know what that feels like, right? So here's the truth. Sweeping problems under the rug isn't what God wants us to do. So what should we do instead? Well, the first thing that I believe we need to do is acknowledge or face the elephant in the room, because you know it's there, your spouse know it's there, but nobody seems to want to go and touch it, right? Or get it out of the house, that elephant. So, what can we do as Christian couples who strive to please God and at the same time nurture intimacy in our relationship? Well, the Bible says a powerful example. We find that in the very beginning of the Bible in Genesis chapter 3, where Adam and Eve had sinned, they had disobeyed God, as you know the story. And when they did, they were hiding from God. They were trying to avoid any encounter or interaction with God. So they went and hid, hoping that may just go away, that time will just take care of it. They were hoping that God would not address the situation. They knew God knew, and God saw them, but they were hoping that somehow God would overlook that situation. But God can't. God cannot do that, because number one, God wants to keep establish a good relationship, a healthy relationship with us. And he know that if there's going to be a healthy relationship, we've got to address these issues. So God didn't just sweep their disobedience under the rug. As you know, he had a difficult conversation with them. He not only um, had that, but he also reminded them of his love. He did things, as you know, to cover their nakedness because God wanted to restore them. He didn't just want to have a difficult conversation with nothing at an end game. No, his end game was to restore and redeem them. So that is also should be our end game. And so God reminded them of his love, but also the consequences of their actions. God had to address that. And the same thing goes for, if you remember the story of King David in 2 Samuel chapter 12 with Bathsheba, right? Who was someone else's wife, and he had committed adultery with her. And as you know the story, God had to deal with that. He used the prophet Nathan to confront King David because he wanted David to know that, David, what you did is wrong. And David knew, but God also had to deal with that. Imagine David was a man that God said he was a man after God's own heart. But God just could not overlook what David did because that would not be a healthy relationship. So God, through the prophet Nathan, confronted David. But the confrontation, like with Adam and Eve, was not just to create a confrontation moment in and of itself. No, it was to also offer a path to redemption. So when we are going to address the elephant in the room, we have to also think about why. What's our objective? What's our ultimate goal? Our ultimate goal is to redeem, is to make better, is to heal, is to restore whatever it was broken because of that situation. You know, I love what Solomon said in Proverbs 27. He said, better is open rebuke than hidden love. Better is open rebuke than hidden love. Wounds from a friend are faithful, but an enemy multiplies kisses. So true love, my friend, doesn't shy away from difficult conversations because it's about honesty and growth. And if we're going to have those things, it's going to have to be dealt with. Now, I know this is easier said than done. Why? Because I've been married for 38 years, and I can tell you we've had moments like this in our relationship. And for me, and this may be sometimes a man thing as well. We just want things to go away and things to get better. We just don't want to deal with things. So we tend to avoid things. Now, I know it's true for both genders, but we tend to avoid things. We try to, as men, like I said, and I know I have, speaking for myself, I would avoid and hoping that time would take care of the matter. But it never did. We just had to address the situation because, again, it festered. And resentment and bitterness and anger are what they begin to build. And I know at times we, in our own relationship, when conflict arose, I know for me, I would rather not deal with it. But we recognize sometimes we have to deal with those things. Now, I've been married for 38 years. We found different ways to address them where it doesn't seem like a big thing or one of those difficult conversations. I think we've learned how to address them in our ongoing everyday interaction. Okay. Now, so I know it's not easy. I know it's difficult, but it is possible. It is possible. And I'm going to share with you how you can do that in a few moments, right? Sweeping problems under the rug is like ignoring the elephant in the room. That elephant is still there, even if we pretend it's not, even if we pretend it's not. Now, one of the reasons that we avoid, I know for me, avoid these moments is because the fear of upsetting our spouse, right? We don't want to upset them. And who does? Who should, that's not the goal. We don't want to be upsetting of our spouse. That's not the goal in a relationship. But we understand, though, sometimes fear can hold us back. The Bible says fear brings torment. And so this fear can hold us back. We might worry about upsetting our spouse, like I mentioned, making them feel like they're being attacked. We may feel fear breaking that connection that we so cherish in our relationship. And so we try to avoid those things, but that fear gets in the way. And I get it. We want to honor God, but you also don't want to be seen as a pushover. And that's where I find in my work as a licensed marriage family therapist and a certified relationship coach for almost 2 decades. When I work with couples or individuals, what I hear more often than not is that I don't want to feel like I push over. I don't want to be naive. I don't want this person to think they can take advantage and keep on doing the very same things over and over again. I don't want that. So as much as they may want to honor God, they just also don't want to feel like a pushover. So what do we do in that moment? And here's what I think is so important. It's what I call the super power that you have and can be used in moments like this. So it's the power of the I statements. You may have heard about the I statements, and there are different layers of it when I teach and counsel, or when I do coaching or do workshops and I teach about the I statements. It takes me a while to unpack it. So obviously I won't do it here because it's more than just using I statements. Is the context, is the content, it's the when it's used, it's the way that you frame it so the person can hear and not hear accusation, not hear finger pointing or blame. And it's really a skill that must be learned over time. Now, it's a secret weapon for you to be able to use to have courageous conversations, and those conversations honor God and your spouse, right? Because you're now having a conversation that needs to be had and not trying to avoid having this conversation. So instead of saying things that maybe sound accusatory, accusatory in nature, I don't have a problem sometimes saying that word, but you heard it. You never listen to me. You might hear someone say, you never listen to me. You may have heard someone say to you, you never listen to me. Now, the emphasis is on never. That's a very pivotal word, because when you hear that, immediately what happens? You feel defensive, because you can point to a time when that's not true. And the person say you never, it's almost like, it's using words like always, every time, you never. Those are what I call, these universal absolute terms that really is very, very difficult to ever say, to use them, because I believe that if there's only one time that a person have done something different from what you're saying they never do, then you can't use that, right? So instead of saying you never listen to me, or you may have heard that and you know how it feels, I want to encourage you to say something like, I feel unheard, or I feel dismissed, or I feel sad when I bring up this concern to you, and you just treat it as if I never even did. I feel dismissed. I feel unheard. I feel sad. So I statement is being used. So what you're trying to do is not to blame the other person for what they're doing, but to take responsibility for your own feelings and your emotions and your thoughts, right? So I statements focus on your feelings without placing blame. And remember Ephesians 4:29 that says, let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. I statements serve as that. It helps to build bridges, not walls. And that's why I encourage using I statements to have these difficult conversations and not to sweep things under the rug. Now, I mentioned about feeling unseen and misunderstood. This is another common struggle that I hear so often in the years I've been doing this. I hear, more often than not. And so the struggle is feeling like you're unseen or misunderstood, right? No one wants to feel to know that they're misunderstood. And they'll say, that's not what I said. That's not what I said. And they fight about that. And rightly so. They want the person to say, no, please, that's not what listen to what I'm saying. But this can create another conflict. You pour your heart out, but your spouse seems distant or dismissive. How hurtful that is. That's one of the most hurtful things I believe in relationships. So here's what I find to be the antidote to that. And that is really where you're doing active listening. So for you as a spouse, maybe you can model this when your spouse is talking to you. It's important to have, be present with them, right? To make make eye contact, all those things, right? Eye contact, to make sure your body language is speaking that you're open, not closed, and all those different things, right? So you want to make sure you give your spouse a full focus. I had a client who said to me how they're struggling with their memory. And I said, why are you struggling with your memory? And they said, because I find that I tend to forget things very easily. I said, well, why do you think that's so? And they'll say when they're having conversation, they might find themselves multiple tasks, tasking, or their mind is on something else and thinking about what's coming up or what they have to do. I said, hey, guess why? You're not present. You're not actively listening. And therefore, your memory doesn't store that. It doesn't see it as important because you never treated that as important. So you're making eye contact and using paraphrase as feedback so the person can know that you truly are understanding. You want to make sure you check in to make sure the person knows you're understanding what they're saying. And then to verify, yes, that's what I'm saying, right? Because you're asking what I call curious questions or clarifying questions. And you're also talking about making observation statements. I know these are things that we could go in a tangent. I don't want to go down a tangent on talking about these, but I just want to mention that these are important, asking clarifying questions or curious questions so that you can be present and the person can know that you're listening to them. What this does is creates a safe space for open communications. And if you check this video right here, I talk about, how to create safe space in your relationship. I think it'd be a good one to watch and see what I had to say about that. Because in this safe space where you can have open communication, and that can strengthen your relationship and deepen your connection and your intimacy with your spouse. So these are the ways I believe that you can go about not having to continue sweeping things under the rug, because when you do, it is not only a matter of time before it's going to show up someplace, right? You can't hide it under the rug for too long. It's going to show up at some point. It's going to crack, that rug and show up at a time when you most don't want it to show up. So it's important. Having difficult conversations doesn't mean there's going to be fighting. And that's what most people think, why they don't even advocate for having this conversation, because they're thinking like, what's the use? We're going to end up fighting. We're going to end up being bitter. We're going to end up having problems. And I don't want that. So I'd rather not deal with it. But my friend, it's going to show up. It's going to show up. So remember, it's about honoring God through this honest conversations or communication, and also to strengthen your bond, your relationship, and which brings you closer. And when you're able to have them, that becomes the outcome. And so I want to encourage you then to approach this with prayer, praying together for guidance and wisdom. Seek support from your church community or from a community that you can trust and feel very comfortable in. Seek out wise counselors. I would suggest good Christian counselors who can reference the very thing that are important. And that is what God thinks about these moments of having honest conversation and why you want to do that. You honor God, but also your spouse. And at the same time, not be a pushover, like I mentioned before, because God himself doesn't advocate for that. So when you follow God's example, like we talked about Adam and Eve and David, and see how God confronted those issues. Remember now, the two important things: God wanted reconciliation or restoration, and redemption. He wants that. So your idea, my purpose of having these difficult conversations, the main objective is that we have restoration, we have redemption, we have reconciliation. That's the objective. You want to be at the end of that, right? When you're able to not push things under the rug, is to have an outcome which is like that. Now, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, and I'd love you to comment below and let me know your thoughts, and just let me know if this makes sense and which of these ideas resonated most with you. Let's have a conversation about that. What are your thoughts on what I've just shared? I mean, would you agree at any point, or would you have added something more that I may have missed? Okay, so comment below and let me know, and make sure you hit that like button as you have, to let me know that you really dig this topic on this video. I would really appreciate that. And so, and again, please subscribe to the channel to make that. Let me know that again, you are adding your name to the number of people who are saying, yeah, give me more of this, give me more of this. And I'll be happy to do that. But I would love for you to reciprocate that by subscribing and hitting the like button as well. And by the way, my friend, if you would like to have a conversation starter, right? If you'd like to have a conversation starter, 28 days of prompts that can help you and your spouse to have healthy conversation and get into the practice of having this dialogue and this conversation, and you're interested in that, I have a link below that you can click on that is happiermarriagesecrets.com/start. And if you hit that link below, you'll be able to take you to where you can get your own free download of these 28 conversations you can have, right? Daily conversations you can have over a 28-day period to get you into the habit of dialogue and conversations. And they're not, ones that are going to create a problem. You can have them because how I've framed them, it's really easy to have those conversations. So I want to encourage you to get that. And I really appreciate that you taking the time to listen and to watch this video. I really appreciate that. And make certain that you watch this video right here, because again, you'll hear me talk about these difficult conversations and why and how to really go about having them. So watch this, my friend. May God bless you. And thank you for taking the time to listen and to watch this video. And please share this with at least one other person. God bless you. And I'll see you on the next video. And we will do this once again. God bless you. And I'll see you on the flip side. Yeah.